Good afternoon, everyone. There's Earl. Welcome to the June 2025 Child Advocate Core Training. So we're going to be doing this for the next 4 weeks, Monday through Thursday. Same bat channel, same bat time throughout. So my name's Ryan Murray. I am the Executive Director of the Washington Association of Child Advocate Programs. Um, I've been the executive director now for over 10 years, and I've been doing child welfare stuff in this office and in, a little bit in Seattle for 25 years. So I've been doing this for a while. And this curriculum, we have been using it for the past 5 years. And I've been trying to keep it up to date as we go along, but you may notice we're just now getting, you know how it is. Well, maybe you don't know how it is in child welfare, but curriculums expire pretty quickly. But we're going to be reviewing this, but this is still a pretty good curriculum because I've been updating it as we go along. Anyway, so before we get started, just want to kind of give you the lay of the land here and what to expect. But first of all, thank you for giving up your June and these precious few months of daylight that we have in the Pacific Northwest to do this training. I purposely picked June because I did it in July last year, and I'm like, I'm not giving up my summer again. So I was like, January, let's do it, right? Like, because everybody's usually really excited because it's still cold and wet and rainy. And here we have like beautiful, beautiful weather outside. So I'm sorry. I wish I could control the weather, but I can't. But you're in here stuck with me. So, but thank you for giving up these next 4 weeks in order to be an advocate for a kid that needs one. So, getting into the room, you all found the spot. Yay! Good. Just so you know, this link will not change throughout. It's the same link. So if you want to go ahead and set yourself a calendar reminder, go ahead and do it. And this link is also the same. This training link works for both the morning and the evening classes. We use the same link. So for whatever reason you need to come to the morning, do it. I don't care. It's the same link. The people who might care, though, are your program people. So if you need to go to a different day or a different schedule, or if you even need to miss a session or two, let your coordinator know. I don't care, right? I just have boxes that show up on my screen and I just say the same thing regardless who's here. But if you do need to miss a training or if you're going to be late or anything like that, by all means, let your coordinator know. I will let you in whenever you want to come in. So the other thing to know too is I will start promptly at 5:30 every day, maybe 5:31 because people get a little bit of a late start in the evening. But I will start at 5:30 or 10 o'clock on the nose each day. You can go ahead and expect to count on being here for the full 2 hours. Every once in a while, we'll get to a spot where I may let you go early, but go ahead and just count on being here for the full 2 hours. Okay. I start right at 5:30 and 10. And my commitment to you is we will end by 7:30 or noon, depending on what session you go. We will not go over. So kind of wherever we are, I will cut us off. I've been doing this training now for 5 years, multiple times a year, and I can think of like 2 or 3 times where I went over. And that was because somebody asked me a really good question at 7:29. So it wasn't my fault, it was theirs. But anyway, I will, shut us down at 7:30. Couple of other things, and you guys have all done a really good job with this. Please keep yourself on mute when you're not speaking. Microphones are really good at picking up extraneous noise, and it goes right into these big honking earphones that I'm wearing. So keep yourself on mute and when you want to talk, just unmute. It's pretty simple. So keep yourself on mute when you're not speaking. The other thing, just, we will not be taking breaks. We're going to be going for the full 2 hours, so do what you need to ahead of time. That said, sometimes life happens. Do what you need to do, right? Just shut your camera off. You don't have to tell or say, hey, I'll be right back. I don't, just come back when you're ready, that sort of a thing. But we will not be taking breaks, right? We're going to go for the full 2 hours. Okay, couple of other things. Your name. What would really help me out as I'm facilitating this training is making sure your name has your first and last name, but then also if you could include what county you're going to be volunteering in, that way I know what to tell you. And the best way to do that is if you're on your computer, hover over your picture, hover your mouse over your computer or picture, and then click the three dots next to it up in the right-hand corner. And then all the way down at the bottom, at least on mine, you should see a function called rename. Once you find that, click on it. You'll get a little box that pops up and you can put in there what you want. So for example, I'm going to put mine in there as well, or update mine. Balance Peers, CCA. Ooh. There's our Skagit person and our Kitsap person. Wow. Let's see. Good, 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 good. Excellent. Easy peasy. So one of the other things that we do, and this is how I'll start every day, is just ask you to put something in chat. That's one of the ways that we take attendance. So I'm going to ask you to do that right now. Please put anything you want in chat, but just as a way to kind of say, I'm here. Excellent. Chat is also a good place to put questions if you have them. But I'll be honest, this is a pretty small class. So if you've got questions, just ask. It's not like I'm training 50 people. There's like 10 of you on here. So don't just interrupt me whenever you have a question. The other thing I want to draw your attention to as well is you may see a couple of folks who have asterisks in front of their name or in front of their county. Those are just staff people. So we have staff that come from across the state that pop in here every once in a while. They know what they're talking about. So if they're answering your questions, feel free to trust them, right? Isn't that right, Verl? Yes. Okay. Let's keep going. So what to expect? There will be a high degree of interaction, well, at least high degree in terms of the Zoom world. So I'm going to be putting you in small breakout rooms a lot. We're going to be discussing things a lot. I'm going to ask you to fill out surveys and stuff like that a lot. So be prepared to engage. This is not going to be one of those trainings where you can just pop in your AirPods and then go fold laundry or make dinner, right? Like there's going to be people talking and stuff like that. So this is not a sit and get training. We're dealing with a lot of complicated stuff here, and it's just we need that interaction back and forth and make sure that you guys are actually understanding what we're talking about. Otherwise, I just post a whole bunch of YouTube videos and you guys could go watch that. That's not going to help you. So please expect, so when you're here for those 2 hours, just to be fully present, just think of it like you're in a classroom, right? If you're sitting, you're learning, but we'll be doing a little bit more interactive stuff. The other thing, I'm just going to tee this up right now. You are going to be dealing with some challenging material. We work with families that are in crisis, right? And the families that we're working with have lots of issues and multiple issues. And the kids that we're going to be working with are going to have issues and multiple issues. I will pretty much guarantee you at some point during this training, you'll be like, that's not how I thought the world worked. It is. Like, I'm just going to be honest with you, right? Like, so there's going to be some things that you may personally disagree with, or, we're going to be talking, just for example, we're going to be talking about DV. We're going to be talking about substance abuse, so addiction and all of the things of that nature, mental health issues, LGBTQ when it comes to our kids and sometimes our parents as well. We're going to be talking about race. These are all critical things that we need to talk about before we let you or before you become a child advocate. And so we want to make sure that you guys have an understanding of it and that you can be an effective advocate for the families that we're going to be working with, right? These kids have already been hurt enough. They don't need another adult messing things up for them, right? So I guarantee at some point you're going to be challenged. And that's okay. That's par for the course, and we totally expect that. My views on the way the world works have completely shifted in my 25 years of working in this system, right? I used to be very punitive when it came to parents. And now I'm like, nope, they just pretty much of them just had a really bad, the parents that we're working with themselves had bad childhoods, and we're just, suffering the consequences of that. So anyway, I'm just saying be open to that. And more importantly, one of the most important things that a GIL can do is be able to take in information that they may personally disagree with. And being able to take in that information and then being able to report it back to the court in the way that they need to hear it. That's what we're training you to do. So these are the expectations kind of as we go along. But just hang with me. The other thing I'll say too, if you find yourself being challenged or triggered or, like I don't necessarily believe that, what I'd really appreciate it if you would try to do is just do a little self-reflection and ask yourself why you feel the way that you feel. Or why do you think the way that you think as well, right? That would be healthy if we could all do that. Part of what we're training you to do too is do some critical thinking when it comes to working with the families that we're working with. We don't want you to go on autopilot. There will be some homework, although I've tried to keep it pretty limited because you're already spending 30 hours in class. But there's going to be an article, like a 50-page article that I want you to at least look over or read as much as you can. I'm going to ask you to write an email to a social worker. I'm going to ask you to watch a video, and I've tried to schedule these out and space them out so there's usually like one assignment or two each week. And I'll probably assign those to you on Thursday so that you have all weekend to get those done. Now, just because there's not that much homework doesn't mean I don't expect you to do it. Because if I'm assigning it, we're going to be discussing it in class probably either the day or the day after. So that's why I want to make sure you have it all done and get it all ready to go. And to take it seriously. Parking lot, I throw this up there just because, I don't know, depending on how many chatty Cathys or chatty Chads, chatty Chads, we'll do it that way. We have sometimes we get into some rabbit holes of discussion about certain things or, that sort of a thing. I reserve the right to kind of cut those off because sometimes we're just going to have to move forward. I'll let them go for as long as we have time for, and if I think that they're still contributing to the rest of the class. But sometimes there's just going to be natural, times where I'm like, okay, guys, we got to move forward. So the other thing, alphabet soup. We are a technical profession. We use a lot of acronyms, and we don't use them to prove how smart we are. And look at us. We can take the first letter of a series of words and make new words out of them. No, that's not why we do it. It's just shorthand. We're not trying to be smarter than you, or we're not trying to use them to confuse you. It's just that's how we talk. I'm sure if I were to follow you around at your job, you would have all kinds of acronyms that you use all the time that I'd be like, what's that? What's that? I don't know. If you hear an acronym and you're not sure what it stands for or what it means, ask. And don't be afraid to ask. You guys are brand new into this world. It's totally fine. I will try to remember to when I use an acronym to say what it means, but sometimes I forget. Okay. So just ask. I used to be very afraid of asking because I didn't want people to think I was dumb, right? Oh, I'll just figure that out on my own. That doesn't get me very far. So I've learned from my mistakes. Ask if you don't know something. That shows everybody that you're paying attention and that you care. Care. So, and then finally, please know that this whole training series is an ongoing evaluation process. We're going to make sure that you're a good fit for this and that this is the right role for you and that, but we also expect you to do the same. Make sure this is a good fit for you. Make sure that what you're learning is in line with what you want to do. So we're going to be evaluating you, and you please evaluate us. I try to be pretty clear about what the expectations are, and some people are just like, you know what? I thought I was going to be rocking babies or playing basketball with my kid. That's not what we do. And it's okay if you're like, whoops, sorry, wrong training. Because the worst thing you can do is take one of these kids' cases and then realize way too late, I don't like this. Because that's going to hurt the kid too. Questions so far? Anyone? Okay. Well, let's have some fun then. I've done enough talking. I'm going to pair you up, and I would like you to introduce yourself to the person I pair you with. You're going to have 3 minutes to talk about, who you are, where you're from, what you do, all that good stuff. But one of the questions that I want you to answer is, why did you sign up for this class? Why do you want to be a child advocate? And let your partner know that. After 3 minutes, I'm going to send out a message and just say switch, and then the other person introduces themselves to their partner. When we come back, I'm going to have you introduce your partner to the whole group. So if you need to take notes, do whatever you need to do. But you will not be introducing yourself. You're going to be introducing your partner. So 3 minutes, 3 minutes, and then I'll have you all come back. And I'll bring you all back, okay? What questions do you have about this activity while I set up the breakout rooms? Anyone? Welcome back, everyone. Who would like to introduce their partner to the rest of the group?
I'll go first.
Arthur, go for it.
All right, so I had two individuals. Um Chris, he's a foster parent. His background is military. Um he him and his wife, they do respite services, but the key to it is, and this is how I connected with him, is so he takes in the children that no one wants. Um which is how I really connected with him because I'm also as a foster parent and I take in the children no one wants, the hard ones they say, when all they need to do is be heard a little bit. So, um, that was who I had was Chris.
Okay, thank you. Chris, do you want to introduce one of your threesome?
I have Courtney.
Okay,
Um, she's going to be doing Cowlitz from 2011. She's lived there. She used to be a troublemaker, she says, which in 2013 she went into recovery and she is doing phenomenally. She hasn't stopped since. She started a nonprofit advocating for fathers because fathers are overlooked most of the time in this. And she signed up this morning and she told she could start training and she jumped right on it this morning
great,
or now.
great. Thank you. Courtney, do you mind introducing Arthur?
I don't mind at all.
you.
So I got the pleasure of getting to know Arthur, and let's see. He's lived in Washington for 20 years, and he's doing child advocacy in Pierce, and he is working on his master's and interning at DCYF. He said specifically he's probably not going to be a social worker, but he gets a wide range of options with a master's. So I think we connected on that, and I appreciated that. And he wants to see something different in how people and parents are understanding the court process. So kind of what I gathered from that in a smaller sense would be more education and less assumption on how the court process works. And I think also like what actually happens within the court system once you get in there. So
Great.
so
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Next pair or triad.
I'll go.
I'll volunteer.
Laura, go ahead, and then Bob, you'll do your group next.
All right, I had Jen, and I'm probably going to totally butcher her last name.
You don't even have to try.
Shadowski?
Good job. Yeah,
Yay!
Shadowski.
She's from she's living in Camas, so she's representing Clark County. She is a mom of two, so she has a senior and a freshman in high school. So I bow down to you because that is a very hard age. She's married. She's been in high tech for, she said, about 3 decades, and she works a lot with India. So they're about 12 and a half hours ahead. So she has a very interesting schedule, working mornings and nights. What was I going to say? And so she wanted to get into advocacy because she wants to contribute and give back. She's been interested in it for a very long time, but with her family and work schedule, it has not worked up until now. She just couldn't fully commit, but now with her children in high school and less reliant on her, it has worked out to be a perfect time for her.
Great. Thank you. Jen, do you mind introducing Laura?
Yeah. Thanks, Laura. So I met the lovely Laura. She is married as well and has 3 children. She referenced 2 bonus children. She called them a 27-year-old and an 8-year-old. And she has a biological son that tragically she lost to suicide at 15, which I think has been a motivator for her to be involved in this program. And from what I heard from her, she's really just done a lot to contribute to her community. Her current job right now is with Compass Health with a mobile crisis outreach team. So a lot of wonderful work that she's doing. So
Great. Thank you so much.
it was nice to meet you.
Bob, what about you? Who'd you have?
Oh, I had Pam Wren from Pierce County. She's a traffic engineer, and she's got a son that she adopted from foster care about 14 years ago. He's 16 now, so he was 2 when he was adopted. The mother of her son was, her parental rights were terminated in a dependency case, and her son's got some medical needs. He's on an IEP, but she's got a little experience with having raised a son through the system.
Great. Pam, do you mind introducing Bob?
Sure, yeah. So I was very happy to meet Bob, who is from the Spokane area, and he has 3 children, adult children, and 4 grandchildren. And he retired as an administrative law judge in the state of Washington. But prior to that, he was a juvenile court judge in Oklahoma for many years, and felt like he made a lot of impact there when he could work on the dependency cases, although he dealt with all kinds of other types of cases in juvenile court as well. So he has wide experience, and I was very impressed by all of the experience he brought to the conversation and to the work. So yeah, I was happy to meet you, Bob.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much. Next pair.
I can go next.
Okay, go for it, Brent.
I had two other people in my group, Faith and Juana. Faith, sh right now she's in university and she's going into her sophomore year, and she's studying forensic psychology. And she was interested in becoming a volunteer because she's trying to figure out her career path, and she also loves working with kids.
Great.
And should I do Juana too?
Now let somebody else do Juana.
Okay.
In fact, let's have Faith do Juana.
Hi. So Juana loves kids and she really feels for kids in difficult situations. And she's had a lot of experience. She worked at a school for deaf kids and she got connected through her church to the advocacy program. And she just wants to feel like she can make a difference in kids' lives.
Great, thank you. Juana, why don't you do Brent? Oh, you're muted. We can't hear you, Juana. There
Now
we go.
can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Okay. So Brent wants to work in the social worker field. She's with children. She's got a pre-law degree. She's trying to decide on what she wants to do with that, referring to children and everything. And that's what I have.
Thanks, Juana.
I had two of them. I had Brent and I had Faith also. So we had two of them.
Yep, we got him. Thank you.
Mhm.
Others. I think that's everyone, isn't it? Oh, no.
I could go.
Eric, go for it.
Okay. I had Christina from Cowlitz County. She's interested in being an advocate because as a child, she actually needed an advocate herself. So I think she has a really good understanding of the need for it. She's pursuing learning early childhood education and trying to decide if she wants to continue forward and become a social worker or some other avenue.
Excellent. Thank you, Eric. Christina, tell us about Eric.
He is a senior data engineer and works remotely and wants to explore volunteering because he was a single dad raising his daughter and feels that there's a lot of children in the world who don't have someone to step up for them in the way that he stepped up for his daughter, and wants to learn more about the court process and how all this works.
Great. Now I think we got everyone. You notice how all the staff peeled off at the end of this thing too? Because they're like, woo, we're gonna go hide. Anyway, so you just got me. But thank you. I mean, you heard all the wide variety of skills and people that we've got in this training. We've got foster parents, we've got judges, we've got data engineers. Like, this is what makes this program so awesome, because all of you have skills that are going to come in handy when you're working with these families. There is no perfect guardian ad litem, profile, or what people need to do this. There's no such thing as that. And so it's really great. Part of the thing that makes this program so great is this wide variety of professions and technical expertise. I learned just as much from you guys in ways that I can make this training better, hearing how you bring in stuff from your fields or your professions into this area as well. So I really appreciate the diversity of experience that you all bring to this training, and we can use it. We'll use it all. One of the things we'll talk about in week 3 is the difference between safety versus risk. And I had a guy from Hanford telling me like, nope, that's how we do the same analysis when it comes to nuclear disposal. I was like, wow, that's really cool. That works for child welfare as well. So it's that kind of thing. I love that kind of thing where you bring what you know and kind of how you experience things and apply it to child welfare. It'll work. I've got a geology degree of all things. So, and here I am teaching you all how to do this work. So we'll be good. Okay, a couple of other things before we get started in earnest. And I'll just be honest with you, since this is such a smaller class, we'll probably be going through this stuff pretty quickly. So if I'm ever going too fast or you want to slow down, let me, or go ahead and ask a question. We can talk a little bit more about it, but with only 10 people, we'll go fast because we don't have people asking questions. So some final ground rules and group norms before we begin this adventure. Number one, I already talked about this. Show up on time and come prepared. If I've assigned homework, please make sure that you do it because we're probably going to be using it in class for the in-class portion of the assignment. And like I said, show up at either 10 or 5:30. 2, stay mentally and physically present. Keep your cameras on as much as possible. I get it. Some days we all have bad hair days and we don't want to be on camera. Totally fine. I get it. Just don't let that be the exception and not the rule. It really helps me as a trainer to be able to see all your faces to make sure that I'm still, when I try to make a joke that people smile at least every once in a while, that means I'm like, oh, okay, people are listening. I really appreciate that. Also, it just helps me kind of keep the class moving in a moving forward so that I hate teaching into the black void that is Zoom when nobody is there. So believe it or not, I actually do look at your facial expressions and make sure that we're still all on board. 3, stay on task and on topic. Where this really comes into play is in the small groups. I do this too. I'm on Zooms all the time. And there's this tendency, especially when you're in a training and the instructor puts you in a small group, that you spend the first couple of minutes waiting for everybody to get there, kind of settling in. And then somebody will eventually ask, what did he ask us to do? Please don't do that. We do not have time for that. When I put you in those small groups, jump in and just start talking. Right? Because if you wait around, there's not a lot of time in these small groups. And so I'm expecting you to kind of jump in there, start talking, do the work, and then come back out. If you waste all the time, just who's going to talk first or who's going to do that, you're going to miss some critical time of just being able to discuss the points that we're talking about. So jump in there. The other thing with small groups too, is that I do try to keep them, depending on how much I want you guys to talk and stuff like that, you change the size of them. So for example, if you're in a group with 5 other people and I give you 10 minutes of group time, that you can kind of figure on, I got about 2 minutes to talk, right? And the other 8 minutes, I'm going to be listening to other people talk as they use up their 2 minutes. So keep that in mind when you're talking or when you're in those small groups. And it's really important that everybody gets a chance to talk in those small groups. Most of the learning that you're going to be doing is going to be in those small groups, not listening to me. Because adults like to talk about things that they just learned. That's how they get things to stick. So that's why we put you in small groups, so that you have that chance to kind of talk about things, kick the tires, so to speak, right? Learn about what it is that we're doing. So, extroverts. Just because nobody's speaking doesn't mean you need to fill the air. So what I'd like you to do, extroverts, is do me a favor. And once you hit that, couple of minutes or, you start thinking, I've been talking a lot, pass the mic and just be very, ask somebody who hasn't said anything. Hey, so-and-so, what are you thinking? What do you think? Right? Do that. Introverts. I feel your pain, my brothers and sisters. I am quite happy to let everybody else talk, right? Don't do that. The other thing I've learned, especially in this world, this court world, as an introvert, when it comes to extroverts, is that extroverts don't mind being interrupted, especially if they've been talking for a while. In fact, they kind of expect it. And so it's okay for you to be like, can I talk? Or I have something to add. Can I add? So introverts, that's okay. They do. They don't mind it, and they fully expect it. So, but I'm hoping you guys can all kind of reach this mutual equilibrium. Extroverts, bring the introverts out of their shell. Introverts, step in there every once in a while and say, I got something I need to say. We're going to all learn into our learning. We're going to all lean into some of the things that we need to work on. So it's part of this training as well. Number 5, listen with an open mind. I can't have you shut off when when I'm making a teaching point because you don't necessarily agree with what I'm saying. What I'm giving, this is a curriculum that was approved by the courts, and this is what the courts expect you to know. So, that said, there are going to be times that you might be challenged in your thinking or thinking of the way that, what the court expects are or what the expectations are or just what it means to be a kid's advocate and working with families in this system. I still need you to listen, and I still need you to be able to report those things back. In fact, we'll probably get to one of these points today. So, child welfare is complex. People are complex. Families are complex. There's not one set of rules that applies to everyone. There's laws, but when it comes to doing the day in and day out stuff of this work, there's a lot of wiggle room. And so you're going to hear me say, oftentimes you may ask a question and you're going to hear me say, it depends. That's because every case is different. Every case is unique. And anyway, it's complicated. And that's good. Because if it were easy, we just have AI do all the answers for us. And then we'd just be raising test tube babies like Brave New World. So there you go. Ask for clarification. I fully expect, and your coordinators fully expect for you to have a lot of questions about what's going on. In fact, the volunteers that we get the most worried about are the ones that think that they know everything already. Those ones suck, right? So ask questions. Ask for clarification. That's great. That's part of how we learn how to do this work together. Number 7, participate in each other's learning. There will not be a class valedictorian of the June 2025 Guardian Ad Litem for Dependent Kids training. Help each other out. Help people understand, right? If somebody's like, hey, what did he just say? Or what question, fill it out, answer the question. It's fine, especially in those small groups too. Help each other learn. And then finally, please check in with your local program staff throughout this training. Many of the programs have maybe once a week or something through this training, a time where you can all meet with them. I highly encourage you to meet with them. What I'm giving you is a kind of the statewide perspective of how Guardian Ad Litem and child welfare work should be working. Every court in this state, every court in this state is a little bit different, right? And that's partially by design, because each judge is an elected official. They run their own courtrooms, right? So there's not one state way of doing things. We try where we can, but every court is a little bit different. Every judge is a little bit different. And so your program people are going to be able to let you know what's expected or what may be a little bit different than what I'm teaching you in this class. And the only way you're going to know that is if you go and talk to those local people. They're going to be the people that you're going to be working with after this training. You will probably never see me again, unless I do some other training somewhere. But they're the people that you need to have the relationship with, not necessarily me, because they're the people you're going to be working with long term. I just train you. So those are some group rules, ground rules and group norms. Is there anything that you need or that you'd like to request of this community that you're going to be a part of to help you better learn how to be an advocate? Is there anything you'd like to add to this list? Anyone? While you're thinking, Juana, I'm going to go to Pam.
Talk with each other about problems.
Oh, wait. So what was that, Juana? Say it again.
I said, talk with each other. If we're given the classrooms, we can talk with each other about to resolve the problems that come up with your class. Just what would you do? What would you do? I would do this, et cetera, et cetera.
As much as we can, Juana. I'm going to let you talk to others. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Pam.
Yeah, thanks. I was wondering, I don't have anything to add to the list, but I was wondering when you were talking about how, we'll be working for our local offices, which makes a lot of sense. But I guess I was wondering if you could give us some perspective on how often, or if ever, if we do continue with this, we would be interacting with folks from around the state like we are here. Does that ever happen beyond the training, or is it really just you go back to your district and then you stay there?
Pretty much you go back to your district and you hang out there. There's a little bit. We've been trying to, I'll just be honest with you too. We used to do a big annual conference every year, right? We'd bring all the volunteers. The last time we did it, there was, of the 1,000 or 2,000 volunteers that we have across the state, we had 100 people. And for those of you that have never done event planning, conferences are expensive. So we, in my board, and I'm just like, I am not doing this for 100 people. Like, I am not doing 30 sessions and workshops and stuff like that for 100 people. So we've been playing around with how to get you guys to interact a little bit more. It's mainly through trainings, but it's pretty much, Pam, you're going to be talking to your people, your local people. So if you don't like them, you're going to have to move.
Sounds good.
Okay.
No, that's not what's okay. No, thank you. I appreciate it. Sounds good.
Good. Anyone else? All right. Let's jump in. What is dependency? So, Child Protective Services, CPS, files what's known as a dependency petition with the court if it believes that the child has been abused or neglected or is at risk of harm and must be removed from the mother or father's care. This begins a court process called a dependency case. So that's what we call them here in Washington. And even though the name is dependency, it doesn't mean that the family or the parents are chemically dependent. That's not what we mean. When we say dependency or we talk about the court dependency system, what we're talking about is that the child is essentially dependent on the state for their care and protection, right? So that's where this term dependency comes from, that the child is dependent on the state rather than their parents because for whatever reason, their parents can't or won't provide that safety. The child then becomes dependent on the state for their care and protection. That doesn't automatically mean foster care, but it does mean that essentially what the court is doing is saying, okay, well, since your parents can't take care of you, we're going to figure out how to make sure that you are taken care of. But that's what dependency means in this context. The child is dependent on the state for their safety and protection because their parents can't or won't provide it. So let's talk a little bit about what happens, how kids and families end up in this system. So in this state, we have I'm sure many of you have heard of this, but we have that child abuse and neglect hotline, 1-866-END-HARM, right? You see that all over the place. And so when a person suspects somebody of abusing or neglecting a child, they make a phone call to that number. And that's the only way you can get into this system. Even though we're the home of Amazon and Microsoft and all kinds of tech, you can't do it online. You got to make a phone call. So somebody calls in and says, I think this child is being abused or neglected. Could be a neighbor, it could be a teacher, it could be a medical provider, it could be the kid's own relatives, right? Like somebody calls in and says, hey, somebody needs to go check on this kid. I think they're being abused or neglected. On the other end of that hotline is a social worker whose job it is to take and respond to these calls. That's all they do all day. They are looking for, that social worker is looking for a couple of things to make sure that this is actually happening, that the abuse or neglect is happening. So the first kind of layer is that they're listening to see if the allegations meet the standards for an investigation. So an example of this may look like, let's say you are at your local farmer's market. And while you're there, you see some questionable parenting. We'll just leave it at that, right? Between a parent and their child. Something that just makes you feel a little uneasy. Maybe they slapped him, maybe they were yelling at him, whatever, right? You continue on your merry way, and then you're driving home, and as you're unpacking the stuff that you got at the farmer's market, you're like, man, that does not feel right. I should do something about this. I'm going to call the child abuse hotline because I saw child abuse and I want somebody to know about this. So you call and that social worker picks up the phone and you're telling them, yeah, like I was just at the farmer's market in West Seattle a couple of hours ago. Yeah, I'm home now, but like it was a couple of hours ago. And, you give the details. And so the social worker is going to ask, do you know these people? Like, do you know their names? No. But you should do something, right? So that's kind of that first level, right? Like if they don't have enough information to follow up, or if you're like, well, no, that happened a couple of hours ago. I don't know where they are. Like, it's not like they're going to send out the CPS squad police and go see if they can track down this instance of child abuse. They just don't. And so that's kind of that first level. And so when something doesn't pass one of these levels, we say it screened out, right? We got a phone call, they take notes, screened out because we didn't have enough information to follow up. The other thing that they're listening for is, can the allegations be substantiated? Let's say you're a teacher and you call in and say, I'm really worried about Johnny. I'm his teacher. It's the middle of winter and he's not been wearing a coat. I think there's something going on at home. I think he's being neglected. What the department will probably say is, well, that's unfortunate for Johnny, but that's not really something that we can do something about. Instead, they would say, are there any resources that you're aware of in your community where Johnny could maybe go get a coat? But we're not we don't give out coats. That's not why we separate children from their parents. So it has to be a level of seriousness that's really impacting the safety of the child. The system used to kind of be this, like anytime you thought a kid was hurt or something like that, the first thing we'd do, I'll get to that in just a moment. The department's a little bit more judicial or a little bit more judicious, I'll say, in terms of what meets that level of, do we really need to interfere with this family? For better or for worse, as some people will say. And then finally, the last thing that social worker is listening for is the child in immediate danger, right? Are you the neighbor calling because you're hearing blood-curdling screams coming from the house next door? Or you may be the kid's teacher or doctor and say, I see this, and this means in my training, this means this kid's being abused or neglected. Like somebody's got to get out there immediately. That's the other thing that they're listening for as well. If the social worker is like, okay, this family could use our help and we have help that we could offer, there's a couple of different ways that social worker can respond. They can send somebody out there from CPS, Child Protective Services, to go knock on that family's door and say, basically, we heard you were abusing your kid. Let us come in and talk to you. And sometimes they come with law enforcement. The other thing that they can do is say, sounds like this family could use some help. Let's go send a kinder and gentler social worker out there to talk to this family and see if there's something they may need that we could provide. Maybe they need a service. Maybe they need a coat and we've got extra coats. I don't know. But right, like there's two ways that the department can choose to respond to when somebody makes an allegation. They can send CPS to go knock on the door, ask them why they're abusing their kids or neglecting their kids, or send a social worker out there and offer services. That offering of services, the kinder, gentler approach to CPS investigation, in this state we call FAR. And FAR stands for Family Alternative Response. And what that social worker will do is go out and talk to that family and said, hey, we've had some allegations come through that maybe some bad things are happening to the kid. Would you consider going to this service? If drugs and alcohol are a problem, maybe you need to go to treatment. We'll offer treatment for you, those sorts of things, or whatever. Basically, they send a social worker out there to listen and then offer voluntary services. Now, you can imagine that sometimes families are like, thank you very much. That's exactly what I needed. That's great. Everybody wins. There are other times where it's, thanks, I'll let you know. And then we're not sure, right? Or they'll be like, yes, we'll do that voluntary service, and then they never show up. So that might be a situation where the social worker says, you know what? I still don't think it's safe enough for these kids. I need the court to come in and tell these parents what to do. Because as a social worker, as a person of the state, I don't have the right to tell you what to do and how to parent your child. The only person who can do that is a judge. Now, the social worker can make recommendations, but if we want parents to do something that they're not willing to do, that's where we file this dependency petition. So the state is basically coming in and saying, hey, Your Honor, we don't think that these parents are parenting in a way that keeps the kids safe and protected. We're going to need your help. Tell them what they need to do. But we need the weight of the court and the authority of the court to be able to do that, because I, as a social worker, cannot. I can do all the voluntary stuff that I want. But if I need parents to do something against their will, I'm going to have the court to say, parents, you're going to have to do this against your will. Does that make sense? This is grossly oversimplified, but I'm trying to get you to understand why we have the court and it's not just the social worker. Does that make sense? Good. So, if the department decides this kid is in grave danger and we need to act immediately, or we've been working with this family for a while and nothing's getting fixed, they may say, we're going to have to go in and ask the court. We're going to file with the court and go that route instead. All of this stuff that I just explained to you, that all happens before we get involved. Advocates are only assigned after that petition is filed. We don't investigate CPS stuff. By the time it gets to us, they've already gone through a pretty lengthy screening process. They've already it's met the legal muster with the court. By the time we get it, all that stuff is pretty much more or less true, or in the way that the court works, more true than false. The reason I tell you about FAR and how this whole system works is because when you get your case, chances are you are going to be shocked at how much the department has already been working with this family and how little effect it has had. And you might be thinking to yourself, why are we wasting time with this FAR stuff? Why don't we just go and take them straight to court, right? Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. What I want you guys to remember is you guys will never see the ones where FAR did work, right? You're only seeing the ones where it failed. And I have to tell my program people about this all the time when they're like, that FAR doesn't work. All my cases are FAR failures, and blah, 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 blah. No, you're just seeing the ones that didn't work. That's why we're here, right? So keep that in mind. There's nothing wrong with FAR, or, I mean, it's the government doing something. There's always something wrong with that. But there's nothing inherently structurally wrong with FAR. It's just that you guys are going to be seeing the ones where that approach didn't work as well as it could have. So don't be one of those people that says FAR is awful. No, you're just seeing the failures. Questions about CPS involvement or any of that, what that looks like? Okay, let's continue. So your next question may be, well, how often does this happen? I'm going to skip over 2021 and we're going to go to 2024 first. So these are hot off the presses. In Washington State, these are all Washington State specific numbers. The department had in 2024 131,000 requests for an intervention. Of those 131,000 phone calls, 118 were regarding reports of abuse or neglect of kids. So in Washington State in 2024, there were over 100,000 phone calls made to CPS regarding kids' safety, regarding calls regarding abuse or neglect of a child. Now, it's not 100,000 separate children because the same kid could have 20 phone calls made on them from different people. Or a vindictive father trying to use the system against his wife so that he gets custody. But anyway, thank you for nodding, Laura and Courtney. But like that's how that works as well, right? So there's 100,000 phone calls. Of that 118,000, only 41,000 screened in, meaning they met all of those conditions, right? They knew who the family was, that the things that were being said are something that the department could do something about. So 41,000 screened in, 76,000 screened out. Of those 40,000, I'm just rounding up at this point. Of those 40,000, half went to that CPS investigation. Hey, hello, are you abusing your kids? Or we've had allegations that you're abusing your kids. Or, hey, sounds like you might be struggling. How can we help you? 50-50. Of those 20,000 in each category, 21,000 were open for services. Meaning that on the far side, maybe they voluntarily agreed to do something that the social worker suggested. On the CPS side, nope, we took them to court and the court ordered them to do something. Of those 21,000 cases that were open up for services, 2,700 kids were placed out of home. That could be foster care. That could be with a relative. But somehow the department is working. So we also have the thing called voluntary placement agreements where the family's like, you know what? We're going to let grandma take care of the kids for 3 months while we try to figure out what's wrong with us. And then we'll take the kid back. So that's what we mean when out of home. Basically, wherever that kid is not staying where they were, they're going somewhere else. And I didn't include this because I'm still trying to dig up this number. There are about 3,000 new cases open each year in Washington State with the court. So it's not the same. It's about the same as kids placed, but sometimes we let the kids stay with the parents. because they just need some oversight. So, but there are about 3,000 new cases opened each year. Now, what I really want you to think about with these numbers is we started 100,000, well, let's do 118,000, and we got all the way down to 3,000. I'm not joking when I say we are dealing with and working with the worst of the worst. Right? The families that we're going to be working with are in severe crisis. You don't just accidentally end up in dependency. There's also, you hear this from time to time too. Well, for example, I don't know how many of you were reading the newspapers during the pandemic, but when we were under lockdown, there's a lot of newspapers out there saying like, oh my gosh, there is going to be this hidden epidemic of child abuse and neglect happening because we don't have eyes on these kids. These kids aren't out in public. And so everybody was predicting, oh my gosh, all this horrible abuse was going to be going on at home, especially like where kids are at homeschooling and stuff like that, because the teachers aren't going to be able to see them. We're not doing doctor's appointments or anything like that. It's going to be awful. And when we all get out of this, oh my gosh, there's going to be this glut of kids that were just abused in their home. These are the numbers from 2021, right in the thick of the pandemic. They're about the same. So, thankfully, it didn't cause more abuse, but it certainly didn't cause less abuse. So, those conditions are still there. The other thing that we'll hear from time to time too, and you may think this too, well, maybe when the economy is bad, or, like when all these services are having to shut down and things like that, oh my gosh, we're going to see more kids in this system. We don't. And the rationale behind that is because we're already dealing with the worst of the worst. You know what I mean? If you don't have a job and the unemployment numbers go up, that's not really going to impact you either. You're already suffering. So we don't see a lot of variation in these numbers. They're relatively consistent. Questions about these stats statewide? Okay. So let's go to the statutory definition of what a dependent child is. There are 4 categories. Only 2 of them apply to you. And really, when it boils down, it's just 1. But we're going to go through these 4 categories. And these are right out of our state statutes, 1334. 1334 is where you find everything dependency related. And it pretty much starts at the beginning of a case and works itself all the way through. So if you're bored or need to go to sleep one night, crack open 1334 and just start clicking through all the laws. They're actually pretty easy to understand. And they're laid out in a pretty logical fashion. So, unlike federal laws. Okay. Here we go. 1334, definition of a dependent child. A dependent child, so the A type, has been abandoned. Now, these are situations where parents go and drop their babies off at a library, a fire department, police station, sometimes even a bus, right? Like any place that has that safe place thing, those are people who are authorized to take babies from parents who don't want them anymore. Thankfully, this does not happen that often. And we're not going to waste a good volunteer like you on an abandonment case. That's pretty easy. Court doesn't need a report about how bad what the parents are doing because they've already abandoned the kid. We don't care. So don't need to put a good volunteer on doing that work. and they're rare. I'd be surprised if there were more than 5 a year. B is abused. So B and C. Judge Murphy, you're not allowed to answer this question. But for everybody else here who doesn't have a law degree, I want you to listen and see if you can pick up on the difference between these two types. So B and C. B, a dependent child is abused or neglected as defined in Chapter 2644. Basically, the kid is abused or neglected by a person legally responsible for the care of the child. Or C, has no parent, guardian, or custodian capable of adequately caring for the child, such that the child is in circumstances which constitute a danger of substantial damage to the child's psychological or physical development. What's the difference between those two? Can you hear it? Anyone?
Capable seems like whether or not they're capable.
Okay. It's close.
Intent.
Intent is a big piece of it. Brent, did you want to add something?
Yeah, something I see is that in B, it looks like it says abused or neglected, by the person who's legally responsible. That's like something that's being done to the child or something that the child is receiving that's like negatively impacting them. But in C, it's sort of explaining they have no parent capable of adequately caring for the child. So like maybe their parent could be like disabled or like injured and they're not able to give something for the kid.
Yeah, that kind of goes back with the intent piece of it too. Laura, did you want to add something to that or? Okay. Yeah. And here's the thing, guys. For us, these distinctions don't matter. They really don't. Because what we're trying to get to is what services do they need? We don't care how they, what they did or how they got there or what the intention was. But what do they need to be a healthy, what do we need to do to get these parents to be the parents that they're capable of being? Where you do hear this a lot is especially at the beginning of the case, when you'll have the attorneys arguing back and forth about a type B or a type C dependency. It doesn't matter for us, right? B is basically saying the parents did something, like you were saying, Laura and Brent, they did something. They broke the law, and that's why this kid, they abused or neglected their kid. C is just saying they're not capable. But for us, these don't matter. So what I tell you this because a lot of times you'll hear parents' attorneys saying, we'll agree to a type C dependency, but not a type B. And then the state will be coming around and saying, no, we definitely have enough for a type B. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. So let them play in the sandbox and throw sand at each other about those 2 points. Because what we're trying to figure out is, what does this family need? We don't care how they got there, but how can we put it back together? So the last category is D, receiving extended foster care services as authorized by the other statute that authorizes this. It used to be about 10 or 15 years ago, if you turned 18 and you were in foster care or you were in this system, your social worker would come out to you on your 18th birthday and say, happy birthday, congratulations, you're on your own. Bye. That was it. Because at 18, you were an adult and the state was no longer legally responsible for you. At 18, you are capable of taking care of yourself. And that's when everything would stop. Exactly, Laura. Well, we had a whole bunch of foster kids saying, I am not ready to be an adult when I turn 18. All of my peers, all of my friends, they're still living at home. I'm not an adult yet. Like, I can't get a job and have an apartment and do all these adulty things yet. I'm not ready. So these foster kids convinced the legislature, both in the state and the federals, to say, let's create this program called extended foster care. And basically what it is that a kid, when they turn 18 or after they've turned 18, can essentially sign themselves back into care. and then get to stay at a foster home or get all the services and stuff like that that they were getting while they were in care. Now, because the state and everybody was so afraid that this was going to cost way too much money, when they first set this up, they said, all right, if we're going to do this, if we're going to let you back in the house, so to speak, we're going to ask you on your 18th birthday, and that's the only time you get to answer. Well, you can imagine there were a lot of freshly turned 18-year-olds that were like, screw you all. I am out. I do not want to be here. I don't want to talk to a social worker. I don't want to talk to an attorney. I don't want to talk to a judge. I don't want to talk to a guardian ad litem. Get me out of here. I'd rather live on the streets than have to talk to another one of you. And they did. And then 3 or 4 months later, they're like, could I please come back? Like, this is rough out here. And it used to be that we'd say no, but then we went back the next year and changed the law and said, no, you can sign yourself back in. It does officially end, though. The program does end when the kid hits 22. And to qualify, you basically just have to have a pretty good reason, right? I'm in school. I've got a job. I've got medical issue, something like that. There's a list of things, but pretty much any kid that wants to come back in can. The other thing with that category in particular, they're 18. So they don't need a best interest advocate speaking up for their best interests in court. They're going to get their own attorney. And they can, through their attorney, express their own needs and what they need to the court and let them know as they continue through this extended foster care. Every once in a while, this question will come up from staff across the state. Hey, I've got a volunteer that has been with this kid since they were 13. And they're about to turn 18, and they're wondering if they can continue to be this child's advocate once they turn 18 and they're in extended foster care. Do you know what I'd like to say to that advocate who's been that kid's advocate for 5 years? What the hell are you going to do in the next 3 years that you should have been doing the first 5? If you have a case that's open for 5 years, you're probably not a very good advocate. I don't know why we would reward that. So, I've been this kid's only GAL. I've been in this kid's life for 10 years. Oh my gosh. What are you doing wrong? Our goal is to get in and get out, not to form a codependent relationship with this kid. Sorry. But that's why we're here. Questions? Thank you, Arthur. I'll take that thumbs up. Okay. So let's explore some commonly held beliefs that people have coming into this system. I'm not doing this to do gotcha or to say get you wrong. I just want you to think about it and basically what you think is actually happening to these kids, and then so make a guess, an educated guess, and then we'll look at the real answers. Okay. So what I want you to do is I'm going to go through each one of these things, and I want you to think about what % of the cases do you think involve this type of abuse? And put your answer in chat. Not looking for right or wrong. I'm just trying to challenge some assumptions that you may be bringing into this work. So let's start. What percentages of the cases do you think involve physical abuse of the child? Put your answer in chat. And don't worry about them adding up to 100% because these kids and families come in with multiple issues. So just do your best guess. What % involve physical abuse of the child? Put it in chat. Okay. What about sexual abuse of the child? What percentage of the case involves sexual abuse of the child? Okay. What about chronic neglect of the child? What percentage of the cases involve parental chronic neglect? Substance abuse by one or more of the parents. What percentage of the cases involve parental substance abuse? Mental health issues of the parent or parents. What percentage of the cases involve mental health issues? What about extreme behavior of the child? This child is unruly. We can't control them. And then finally, what about homelessness or inadequate housing? All right, you guys ready to see the real answers? Here they are. So let's go through each one of these. Physical abuse of the child, it's only about 15% of the cases. I'm Gen X. So those of you who are Gen X or older might remember that the old myth about CPS is that, they get involved when when you're being beaten by your parents. Thankfully, as a society, we've pretty much done a pretty good job of saying, hey, you don't need to beat your kid to teach them a thing or two. In fact, we frown upon that. And so, we still get some, but it's only 15%. Used to be a much higher percentage of the cases. Sexual abuse of the child, only 4%. And here's the thing that I want you to remember about this system. When we say sex abuse of the child, that would mean that the parents were the ones that were doing it or responsible for it, letting it to happen. So thankfully, that number is only 4%. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean the kids that come into our system won't be sexually abused, right? That number is way higher than 4% probably. But when we're talking about why the kids came into the system in the first place, it's only 4% of the cases. Chronic neglect, 60%. That's where we see the majority of our cases. And you know what is the leading cause of chronic neglect? Substance abuse. And substance abuse looks different depending on how old the kid, neglect looks different depending on how old the kid is. For example, if you're chronically neglecting a 3 or 4-month-old, that looks way different and is a much more dangerous situation than a 16-year-old who's being chronically neglected, or even a 12-year-old, right? It's not great, but when it comes to safety issues and what we're thinking about and why kids should come into the system, chronic neglect, because of substance abuse, is one of the biggest indicators. It's also why we have so many babies in our system. You may also notice that I left off mental health concerns. The reason being, guess what most of our parents with mental health issues do? They use drugs. They self-medicate. And that's how that addiction forms. We'll talk more about that. But that's what's going on there. So it is extremely rare to just have a parent who's not taking their meds as a reason why they come into care. It happens, right? But generally, that's also, again, remember, we're talking all the way down at the bottom of that funnel. Parents with mental health issues, the easiest way to kind of deal with that is to use. Extreme behavior of the child. This is not that system that takes care of those kids. We have different court processes for those, where we have a parent that may, like they've got a teenager that they can't control or whatever. Those are youth at risk. Those are chins. We do not use dependency for that because the parents really aren't doing anything wrong, right? It's a different legal construct for that type of a situation. That's not what we use dependency for. Dependencies are when we have a parental deficiency that needs to be corrected. And then finally, homelessness or inadequate housing, it's 13% of the cases. Now, if you are homeless and raising a child, that fact alone does not mean you are abusing your child. Not being able to provide housing or, adequate housing is not child abuse or neglect. It's not ideal, but that in and of itself is not a reason why we would be working with that family. There has to be something else, and that's written into our statute. Homelessness or inadequate housing by itself is not enough for a dependency petition. Now, if you're homeless and using, and that's the problem, that's why you're homeless, that might be. But homelessness in and of itself is not child abuse or neglect. Now, and then what is this 13%? Let me tell you where that 13% comes from. Let's say you're at the bottom of that funnel, right? Chances are you're at the bottom, you're the 2% of the worst. Chances are you're going to have government subsidized housing, Section 8 housing, right? Guess what the first thing you lose is the second thing you lose after your children and you're on Section 8 housing. You lose your housing. And there are long wait lists. There's a very short supply of available Section 8 housing. And so you run into the situation where if you get your kids taken away and you've got a space, Section 8 housing for yourself and your two kids, that's the first thing that goes away. Those wait lists are usually a year or two long to get into Section 8 housing. So sometimes you can see we create a problem that wasn't there before, but it's going to be before this case ends. And nobody in this system is going to say, hey, great, we're glad you're clean and sober. We're glad you got your kids back. Sorry, couldn't find you a house, but we're done. Good luck. Like, that's not how it works. Now, this is where I was saying things get complicated really quickly. Because you've got a whole bunch of people who are saying, you've got this really long wait list. So what should we do? Should we hold that space for that family while the parents are going to try to get clean and sober and get their kid back? Should we hold that space and just kind of leave that apartment or that housing unit vacant? Or should we give it to the next family who may have been waiting for a year or two and are just waiting for some space to open up so that they can get into? Do you see how quickly these things kind of get complicated? Like there's no right or wrong answer. You could convince me either way. Yeah, maybe we should hold the space, but what about all these other families that are waiting in line? Why wait? Why let them wait? So these are the types of things that happen when you're dealing in a system with inadequate policymakers and legislators that change the rules on us every so often. So, questions about these stats?
What about the percentage for the mental health issues of the parent?
Those are incorporated into the substance abuse. And I know it says 45% there. Sorry, I meant it. That was my other point.
I see. So they're together. Okay.
Yeah, 45%. It's 70 or 80%. Like, I don't know where that 45% number, but I've talked to all the programs about that. And so chances are one or more of your parents are going to have substance abuse issues. It's rare that they don't. So, in summary, 50% of all cases involve some form of, at least, parental substance abuse or mental health issue. And like I was saying earlier, the impact of substance abuse is greatest on younger kids, right? They're less able to fend for themselves, so to speak, or keep themselves safe. 15% of the cases involve some form of physical abuse. Less than 5 involve sexual abuse of the child. And just ballpark numbers, about 3,000 kids enter the system each year in Washington State. And at any given moment, there are about 6,000 kids with an open dependency. And then over the course of a year, there's about 8,000. So just a stock and flow. So if you ever see numbers like, I thought the numbers were higher than that or lower than that, that's what they're doing. Point in time, about 6,000. Course of a year, 8,000. All right, let's talk about some of the demographics of these kids that you're going to be working with. So this over here, these percentages over here are new kids coming into the system, coming into the court system, meaning they had a dependency petition filed in that calendar year. And I'm sorry I don't have 2024s up yet, but you can see they're pretty much the same. 30% of all the new cases coming into the system in Washington in 2023 involved a child less than 1 year old. So a baby. 2/3 under 5. So our system here in Washington is very much geared towards younger kids. Male versus female, pretty equal, always has been. Now, let's get into the fun part. Let's look at race and the kids who are in the system versus kids in the general population. So here on the right, these are the demographics of kids 18 and younger. So 1% Native, 9% Asian or Pacific Islander, 4% Black, 21% Hispanic, 56% white, 2 or more races, 8%. Over here, we have the statewide cases of just the new cases coming in. So this AI or AN, American Indian, American Native. 3% of the cases statewide involve Native American children. But look at this next category down, American Indian or American Native multi, 12% of all of our new cases involved a child with some Native American ancestry. Compared to, and here we've got 2 or more races, 8%. We've only done one category of kids of color, and we're already over 8% here for multiracial, 12%. That's just if they have a little bit of Indian now. Asian Pacific Islanders, 1% compared to 9%. Black, 5% compared to 4%. But looky here, 8% Black multiracial compared to 8%. Remember, we already had the 12%. We're already up to 20% mixed race kids. And we've just done Black and Native American. Hispanic, 18%, 21%. Multi-other, there's more that we can add. So what I'm saying is, so Chris asks, is the American Indian or American Native so low? Well, it's not low when you look at them compared to the general population. But to get that American Indian or American Native, Chris, that means both parents have to be Native. Same thing with Black, right? To get that, to say you're Black, both parents need to be Black. Otherwise, you're multiracial. I say this to kind of introduce this concept to you all of, we call it disproportionality, meaning that we've got kids of certain ethnic groups that are overrepresented in our system compared to what they are in the general population. There are a variety of factors as to why that may be. It's not just because the people on the social worker phone line are racist, right? Or like the courts are racist. It's the whole thing in general. And we're going to be spending a lot more time talking about that. Not a lot more, but we'll be spending some more time next week talking about the contributing factors to that. Right now, what I want you to be aware of, this does exist. And for those of you who are thinking, well, there's a lot more people in Seattle and Tacoma, and we all know that's where all the people of color live anyway. Joking, of course, obviously. I have a document here that I'm going to put in the chat for you all that shows a county by county breakdown of these same numbers so that you can look and see where you live and kind of see what those numbers look like. So give me just a moment. Pull this up. American Native or Alaska Native? Yes, Bob. It's both. Sorry. And in the chat, here are the 2024 numbers. And then I'm also going to pull them up. And then I'd be interested if any of you want to discuss your local county's numbers, or you want to take a look at them together. Anybody want me to pick on their county?
There's a lot of us here from Pierce.
Yeah.
Would you do, well, going to do that one? Yeah.
Absolutely. So top row, so just let me explain how this works. Top row are the general population of kids. The bottom row is the new dependency filings in 2024. So in Pierce County, 2%, and this number right here are the number of new kids that came in that year. So in Pierce County, 2% versus 1%, Native American. Asian and Pacific Islanders, for whatever reason, they do not end up in our system. So if anything, they're underrepresented compared to what their demographics are. And there's a whole bunch of theories as to why that may be, but generally speaking, I think the first thing, probably generally speaking, is that folks in the Asian community are unwilling to call out others' abuse and neglect. Right? And they don't necessarily have as much dealings with public safety nets and safety systems as Native American, multiracial, and Black. But what I really want to draw your attention to on all of these, 14% of the Pierce County population, multiracial, compared to 39, 42% of all the kids coming in are multiracial. That's almost 3 times as many. How about another county? Let's do Skagit since I don't get to do them very often. Do I even have them on here? Yes. Here we go. Look at this. 10% compared to 2% of the general when it comes to Native American, 10% versus 2%. 5%, 2%. Hispanic, 16 compared to 8. Still disproportional numbers. Now, some of you may be thinking, yeah, but they only had 44 filings. That means we just had to have one Black family or one Native American family that entered the system. And that's going to make those numbers skewed. But what I want you to realize is that given how very few there are in the general population to begin with in that particular county, the fact that we've got one is statistically significant. And I'll just say this too. How would you like to be that one Black family in Skagit County? Chances are you're going to have somebody getting in your business and making a dependency or making a abuse or neglect thing. That's what I'm saying. So I have a lot of people from rural parts of Washington, and they're trying, we don't have a problem with diversity. It's not a problem. Tell that to the Black family that you filed on. Tell that to the Native American, or tell that to the mixed race family that you filed on, because none of you know how to work with those families, or none of you, because they're different, that's how they ended up in the system. Brent?
Could you speak on why the white percentage is so much higher than the other ones?
In terms of which number are you looking at?
So like for Skagit,
Yeah.
like white is at 40%, Hispanic is at 29%,
Yeah.
Native and multi is at 12%. And I just noticed we haven't talked about that part of the chart yet.
Yeah. So they got to be something. So if they're not white kids coming into the system, chances are we're going to be making them up on this multiracial piece. And that could be white and Black, white and Native American. It could be Native American Black. So there's more in that category. And what we typically find is that instead of the numbers matching, so this is when we say, so the numbers matching across all categories, that's why we say it's disproportional. And it's something that we don't want to see happen. If everything all being equal, right, we should see the same percentages in the dependency system as we see in the general population, and we don't. And so those numbers have to come from somewhere. And usually because white is the majority in most of the counties, Brent, we see those numbers down, and then the kids of color, particularly Native American and Black kids, their percentage is higher. So it has to equal 100. Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other counties? Oh, let's do Kitsap. I don't get to do
Cowlitz County. Oh,
what
sorry.
was that, Juana? Where are you from?
Cowlitz County?
Cowlitz. I'm just going to jump right to the headline. 7% multiracial in the general population compared to 20%. So almost 3 times as high for multiracial kids.
Gosh.
The other thing I want to point out about these numbers too is these are just the kids coming in the front door, right? These are just new kids. The research also shows that where you have this discrepancy at the front door only gets worse the longer the kids are in the system. So these numbers are actually higher for each of these these percentage breakdowns for each category. And here's Kitsap. Sorry, Chris, I'm going to pick on your county, but these are the numbers, right? I mean, 11% compared to 2%, 8% compared to 3%. The white numbers are all off. And then 14%.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead, Jen.
I'm curious if there's research that shows whether or not that the need would truly be representative of the population, or is there a relationship between demographics and other, kind of societal things that influence certain races that then result in a higher need?
100%, Jen. And trying to figure out like those kind of like, I mean, look, there's no sugarcoating it. Native American and Black and multiracial families are generally more prone to poverty than their white counterparts, right? And so now the reasons for that are wide and varied too. And, there's all kinds of systemic issues as to why that may be, current issues, but this idea that it's the reason I'm bringing this up to you all right now is we're going to discuss this. But what I want you, we're going to discuss some of those reasons next week when we get a little bit more into the bias and kind of racism piece of this. But what I really need you to be aware of right now is that chances are you're going to be working with and you're going to be advocating for a child that is under 1 year old. Their family is going to be experiencing substance abuse issues. And they're probably going to be a different race than you. And they're going to be multiracial. More often than not. Now, what that means in terms of our advocacy, right? Racial identity is part of a kid's, that's who they are. And we have to be able to advocate for that as well. So you're going to have situations where you may be navigating, mom's Black and dad's white, or, like all of these things. And these are all parts of the families and kids you're going to be working with. So this is really just kind of an exposure type of a thing to let you know, here are the people who we see, here are the kids who we see in this system. And I want to make sure that you know who you're going to be advocating right from the get-go. So that as we go through this training, you can keep all of these things in your mind and figuring out how we best advocate for these kids. Other thoughts or comments? Are you shocked by these numbers? No? Good. Because I'm entrusting you to help us fix these numbers. So. You guys are a very quiet group, so we're probably going to get out 8 minutes early because I want to keep both classes on the same track. So feel free to talk more unless you want to go home sooner. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and end things here tonight. And then tomorrow we're going to pick up with kind of talking a little bit more about the court process, what that looks like, and just some general advocacy points as we continue this introductory unit. But if there aren't any other questions, I will see you all back here tomorrow at 5:30. Enjoy the 8 minutes that you have to go get out and get some sun. So thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye-bye.